Happy to do so. Good afternoon, everyone. Ron Burke here, CEO of the Alliance for Water Efficiency. So glad you could join us today to learn a little bit more about our 2023 through 24 research program. As I'm sure many of you know, we've recently wrapped up a number of important research projects related to cooling tower water efficiency, AMI leak alert notifications, some commercial landscape research as well that we're just wrapping up. And we're in the process of developing and launching our next portfolio of research programs. These project ideas were developed with input from AWE's research committee, as well as conversations and input from stakeholders through a variety of other mechanisms as well. So we're really excited about what the future holds, these next research projects. I'm going to turn it over now to Liesl Hans, our Director of Programs, to walk you through today's agenda. Thank you again for joining.
Thanks, Ron. I'm going to have Andrew talk through a little bit of logistics on the webinar first, and then I'll jump in.
Thanks for joining. This is Andrew Morris at AWE. For those of you I haven't met yet, I'm the Senior Manager for Policy and Programs. I'm new here at AWE, looking forward to working with all of you and meeting you in person, and I'll be helping coordinate today's call. We will have time for questions after Liesl presents on each of the projects. So if you want to go ahead and type those questions in, I will be watching the chat there and the questions and answers function, and we'll get those to Liesl after each section. If we don't get to your question, we will follow up with you after the webinar. So we'll get to as many as we can, time allowing, and follow up with you afterwards otherwise. Also, please look out for a poll at the end of each of Liesl's presentation, where we'll be asking a question to kind of gauge your interest in each project and whether or not you'd like us to follow up with you on a one-on-one basis. Feel free to ask questions anytime. I'm monitoring the question and answers function. If you have anything else I can answer immediately, I'll do that in the chat. Otherwise, we'll handle it at the end of each section. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Liesl.
Great, thank you. Hi, everybody, and welcome again. My name is Liesl Hans. I'm the Director of Programs here at the Alliance for Water Efficiency. Let me talk you through what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to start with a little bit of backstory on how AWE has done research projects in the past, which being new in my role, I've spent a lot of time digging into old files and talking to members about different projects that have happened, as well as spending the last year helping to wrap up some ongoing projects that Ron mentioned. So what we're also then going to talk about today is really 3 research projects that we're going to propose to occur over the next year and a half or so. And there's 3 of them, one related to advanced metering infrastructure, one related to peak demands and managing those peak demands, and then one around large scale landscapes. So we'll talk through each of those. Like Andrew said, we'll have time for Q&A at the end of each one, as well as we'll launch a poll to gauge interest for each of those so that we can make it easier to follow up with you all, and then talk a little bit more about next steps and how to get involved. And then as we have time at the end, we'll share some other AWE announcements about that. So we'll get started here. So I'm nearing my 1-year anniversary with the Alliance, and every day really reaffirms why I love this role and working in this industry. The Alliance really has a track record of working with and for our members, and we're really committed to delivering quality results and resources that are very scientifically sound, but also very practical and useful for folks. So I've really understood that the process has looked like this, and really starts from member input. And I couldn't figure out a great graphic to do this, but the member input really goes throughout the entire project. And so it's really the foundation of all of this. And members help us develop the scope and objectives and firm that up through the project advisory committee. And then they help provide feedback throughout the research process. And then they help and we share the results with the rest of our AW membership. And inevitably, through great research, identifies the next great research. So, which is how some of these projects have come to fruition. So we've already had over a dozen meetings with members to better understand their perspectives and needs and challenges. We've heard input from our research committee and spoken with other external stakeholders. Our large multi-agency projects really do start with this member input. And so I'm really excited to be embarking upon these next 3 ones. So the projects that you'll hear about today have taken the same journey where they really started from member input. So here's a couple examples of recent multi-agency projects. The Alliance takes on a lot of other work and other services that we provide to our members, but in terms of multi-agency research projects, here are a few examples that I could pull together, demonstrating the different levels of participation and different budgets that we've been able to manage, ranging from topics like cooling technology, as well as landscape transformation, a residential scale research project that we did a couple of years ago, the use and effectiveness of municipal irrigation restrictions. That was a great research project. And then more of on the tool side, a continued process to keep the conservation tracking tool updated and meeting current needs. So just to give you a sense of different types of projects, and in each one we've had a variety of agencies in terms of size, types of organization, level of conservation programming, climate, water resource challenges. And I really feel that diverse perspectives make for better results in each of these projects. And hopefully you'll see that theme throughout what I talk about today. So how did we get to these 3 new projects? Again, these really are based on member-driven priorities. We wanted these projects to be relevant to a majority of AW members. Obviously, not every organization is the same, but we want to make sure that the research we're doing is advancing something, has great need and great applicability across our membership. We also spend time understanding what's already out there so that we're not duplicating work and we're filling gaps or updating stuff that's maybe really old. We really want the knowledge to be something that activates or advances something. So whether it's just a matter of bringing lots of information into one place so that people can be more effective with that information, or filling an entire gap in the research space where we just don't have numbers to use to make decisions with. So we've provided multiple topics to meet different organizations' needs or where they're at in terms of what's a major issue for them or a major challenge or opportunity for them. So that's why we have 3 topics to share with you today, recognizing that everybody's kind of in a different spot about what's going to be most valuable to them. And then we've also incorporated different options for folks to participate in projects. We've heard sometimes that the projects can feel inaccessible for either a smaller agency or an agency that maybe doesn't have as much time to put into it as others. So you'll see different levels of participation options, and we can answer more questions if there are some. So I'm going to say kind of broadly here, why would you participate in an AW project? For everybody, it's going to be a little bit differently, but one opportunity often for the research heavy ones is that it allows a cost-effective means to get individualized results. So you can coordinate across multiple agencies. It just makes it for a more cost-effective project rather than having to go out on your own and get the same results that you'll get through one of these research projects. We also see that these projects can be a means to rally organization around something, whether that's bringing multiple departments together or finally having something that will help you move forward on a particular project or decision or strategy that you need to mull over. So really, it can be a way to help create some structure around moving your organization forward on one matter or another. By being part of the project, you can really help steer what that final scope of work looks like. And so you can ensure that your agency's challenges or opportunities are incorporated into that better, so you can influence that. Of course, you'll have early access to findings. The great thing about the Alliance is this folks that are participating in these projects really show up as leaders in the industry. So to the extent that that is valuable for your organization or valuable to your leadership, that can be really powerful. And then ultimately about connection too. So access to a peer network, whether it's through the project advisory committee or for a couple of these projects, access to a more focused peer network around a topic that you really care about. So we increasingly are seeing that folks are finding a lot of value in being able to connect with their peers on a topic that matters to them. And we're gonna do that through these projects. So folks will be able to learn and grow throughout the project, not just at the end when we have the final deliverables. It's a great opportunity for professional development, especially for folks that are new to an organization or new to a particular topic area. This can be a nice way to get involved and learn from others. And then ultimately, we want resources that can provide real numbers, that people can make decisions about benefits and costs, advocate for the things you need, be a resource to support applications for funding, either internal or external grants, things like that. So I'm going to jump into the first project, which is this AMI primer. At the end of each project introduction, we'll pause for questions, and we'll also launch a poll for you all to indicate if you would like to take the next step and see if this project's the right fit for your organization. And then we'll reach out to you, so no need to remember to follow up or anything like that. Those poll results won't be shared broadly, and it'll just be individual staff that will follow up. So advanced metering infrastructure, or AMI, or smart meters, has been really called the utility game changer. You might be feeling a little lost on your AMI journey, or perhaps are fully energized and just looking for answers, directions, or maybe just some friends to navigate the journey with. It really has the power to comprehensively change the way utilities operate. It's not just the means to a bill, but a two-way communication system that enables a wide variety of information streams that utilities historically have not had access to. And it can enable great insight into system and customer water usage, depending on the system, ability to communicate with the meters, and of course with your customers. So we wanted to know what's possible with the AMI data beyond just the kind of foundational use cases of managing high bill complaints, leak or high use notifications. How can we do what we do better? There's lots of opportunities for AMI to enable better customer service, levels of service, improve other operations. But we know that the details matter in this project for sure. What are those processes that need to be updated? Business processes. What are policies you need to think about either changing or putting into place? What kind of skills do you need on your staff to make these things come to life, and more? So these are some of the things that we've been thinking about and wondering about. And of course, we want to know what else is already out there. And as part of another project, we of course spend some time looking at the other resources that are out there. Here's some core ones that are available. There, we've got an AMI template for folks that are on the front end of looking for an AMI system. We've got a basic foundational information resource that Don, one of our consultants, helped create, which is really great, and it just talks through all the basics of the AMI technology, how to do feasibility studies, procurement, all of that. AWWA recently did a study on customer portals and engaging folks through those AMI systems and increasing enrollment and things like that. WRF did a project looking at AMI meter data analytics, and that really focused on a few use cases, so interactions with customers, water loss audits, water accounting, those sorts of things, and then meter management practices, so understanding when meters are under overreading, knowing when to replace them, all those sorts of pieces. And then EPA most recently came out with a guide around using AMI in facilities, so really more steered toward facility managers, which is a great resource. So those are some of the core ones, and then plus a forthcoming AWU report, which will be around our research around AMI-enabled leak notifications that looked at what was the impact of 4 different utility leak notifications, 3 in California and 1 in Texas, and then as well as a wide-reaching survey from over 100 utilities. And one of the questions that we asked really wanted to get at how else are people using AMI data. And we found dozens of examples from utilities across the United States and Canada of ways that people are using AMI data. And so here's a few examples that we could have put up many more here, but just a few, pairing AMI with weather data to understand when people are irrigating during rain events, for example. Being able to conduct and enforce water use restrictions through AMI. Using AMI to better understand who's contributing to peak demands. Using it again for water loss components, kind of like WRF alluded to. So there's a lot of different opportunities here to either enable new programs and services and enhance existing programs and services that you're already doing through being able to better target, better understand what's working and what's not working. So this project is really looking to create a resource that would demonstrate all of the different ways that we can possibly gather of use cases for using AMI data. There will be, of course, a focus on conservation and efficiency, but we have already identified some, and I anticipate identifying more that will expand beyond water efficiency and water conservation focuses. And so it'll be a resource showing all these different ways you can use it, lots of examples from different utilities, data where we can gather it, but this will not necessarily be a data-heavy research project. It'll be more about demonstrating the use cases and some high-level data to go along with them. Really about lessons learned, some collateral, so examples of processes, new business processes of how people are managing things, examples of outreach people are doing with AMI data, might be examples of even just the messages folks are sending out to customers. So hoping to gather lots of examples that people can leverage and not always have to reinvent the wheel or start from scratch at their own organization. And then that document will also provide insight into what are the resources that are needed to make these different use cases effective in your community. And then it won't be part of the project to do education and training, but reveal where utilities might be benefiting or benefit from having additional education and training around how to use AMI data, or potentially how to better engage other stakeholders in the community with how to use AMI data, whether that's facility managers or irrigation companies, things like that. And then for this group, we are hoping to have this peer network that you can learn from others who are really jazzed about AMI, who are working on similar challenges. We really hope that this peer network will also include multiple folks from different departments, so it won't just be necessarily the conservation contact at one organization to the other conservation contact, but also bringing in the folks that are thinking about billing and thinking about metering, all of those other pieces that touch the AMI systems and the customer portals. And we're hopefully also going to do some work engaging with the vendors that are in this space. We know there is still some to be desired in the functionality that's offered by meter software companies. And so hopefully this resource can also help influence the market and what's available to utilities. To give you a sense of what we're aiming for in terms of timeline and what it means to be a participant, we're hoping to launch this one first. This is the first of the projects we're hoping to launch. So May, June this year. We anticipate the project overall will be about a year. It does not require sharing of AMI data. So if that's sort of a hard deal breaker, that's not what this project is going to be about. We know that can be a big challenge sometimes. And the project will be conducted in-house, so by AWE staff. And in terms of what the commitment would look like in terms of time is we're estimating, let's say, about 20 hours over the next year. Obviously, you can scale up your involvement depending on where you're at as an organization and how much you want to get out of the project. So we have a fundraising goal here and two levels of how you can be involved with this. So we're calling this sponsors because in part, as compared to other research projects, we're not necessarily asking people to contribute data, although we're hoping that they will contribute information about what they're doing, what's working, lessons learned, examples, those sorts of things. And then we also wanted this lower sponsor level to recognize that sometimes folks are a smaller agency or they have less budget capacity to work with. So we really want to create an opportunity to increase the diversity of perspectives and the types of agencies that this resource will ultimately benefit. So we've got our little percent of target. We're about 40% of the way there, I think, maybe a little bit more. This is probably conservatively marked as we've been talking to folks. So I will pause here and see if there's any questions, and if and when it makes sense, Andrew, to launch the interest poll. So I'll pause there. Andrew, where are we at?
Thanks. Yeah, I don't see any questions yet. So why don't I launch the poll, and at the same time, if folks have any questions, they can type those in. So I'll go ahead and launch this poll. And feel free to type questions in the chat as well. Thanks so much. I see a good number of folks responding, so we'll give it another minute or so here.
And just a reminder, only AWE staff will see these results. So
just give it 10, 15 more seconds on that poll. Still not seeing any questions. Feel free to drop them in if you have them, or reach out to any of us afterwards. And obviously we'll use this poll list to reach out directly to all of you. A member of AWE staff will. So last call for the poll. All right, looks like they've stopped coming in.
Okay.
So go ahead and close that. And if you want to keep going there, I don't know
Did
if
it
it's
like close my presentation there? It's looking funky.
yeah, it looks like it did. So if you're able to share, I can.
Oh, there we go. Did it? Do you see it now, Andrew?
I do. Yep. Looks like we're all set. So if you want to carry on, let's see. I see one question before we move on. It's the question about whether it will be led by AWE or are we looking for proposals from consultants for the AMI?
At this point, we are expecting that AWE staff will be managing and leading this project. It's a smaller project, doesn't involve a ton of data analysis or things like that. And really, we see it as an opportunity to continue to build relationships, really strong relationships with a lot of our members. So we're opting to take this one in-house. The other two projects will potentially have consultant participation, which is another thing that we were looking at of how to spread out this work over ourselves, as well as we know there's lots of great resources that work in the consulting field. So for this particular project, looking to keep it in-house, but open to conversations about potential partnerships down the line if you're a consultant that works in this space.
Thanks, Lisa. One more came in on AMI. And the question was whether people can participate if they're gearing up for AMI implementation.
Yeah, I think that's definitely part of this. If you're gearing up, I think it could be valuable in terms of participating on the front end so that you're learning from other folks. We do want to make sure that we've got a good mix of people who are fully activated in AMI and have been trying and testing out things and figuring out what works and what doesn't work. But I do think we probably have some capacity and room for organizations that are on the earlier end of their AMI journey.
Thanks, Lisa. That's it.
Great. Good questions. This next project, this one was generated by our research committee. Last year, as I was getting started here at the organization, the research committee was spending time exploring what research topics the Alliance should be spending time on. And peak demands was one that came up, and we had a little working group spending time talking about really what that meant and what kind of research questions would be most valuable. And so that was a really fun initial project that I got to spend some time with some of our members. So peak demands, let's talk about what this. We all know that it takes a lot to get water to the tap. There's a lot of infrastructure, there's a lot of decisions, there's a lot of facilities. And we know that that can be further exacerbated or complicated by varying demands. And so some communities have a lot of fluctuations, some which are pretty predictable, some which are less predictable, some which are maybe growing, some maybe have actually been managed and are decreasing over time. We know that peak demands drive a lot of expensive decisions at an organization. So peak demands or peaking factors often influence facility sizing, distribution infrastructure sizing, pump sizing, storage sizing, all of those sorts of pieces. And so, of course, we in the water conservation and efficiency and demand management space see a lot of value in the ability to address those challenges, at least partly, by managing customer demands. And so we know that this balance between supply and demand really is that a balancing act. But we know that effectively managing peak demand has the potential to help an organization extend the life of their facilities and their infrastructure and their water supplies, potentially avoid very expensive investments, or at least defer them into the future until they grow into some of those things. There's potential to avoid O&M costs as well as this, especially where you've got energy intensive systems. And ultimately, reducing all of those types of costs can help lower your costs as an overall organization long term, and that can help keep water bills lower for your customers, avoid having oversized infrastructure down the line, and can help maintain levels of services and things like that. And of course, reducing greenhouse gas, because sometimes when we're seeing water peaking in a system, a lot of times that means energy is also peaking in your community, and those can kind of be at odds with what service we're trying to meet. And then overall improving resiliency, especially as we're seeing more extremes from climate change, being able to better navigate balancing that supply and demand is of course super valuable to organizations. So we really wanted to better understand how can agencies effectively plan for and manage peak demand. A handful of years ago, the Alliance did a small proof of concept sort of study of peak demand, water management in partnership with Rachio and some customers in the New Jersey American Water service area, and looked at how using smart irrigation controllers you can shift demand to different days to react to potential situations that you might be experiencing in your system. And it sort of demonstrated what could be possible if this was widely deployed. Here's a couple of snippets from some other organizations that I saw online about the ways that they're communicating and thinking about peak demand. So one of them here in the blue and orange graph is demonstrating what peak demand and maximum monthly demand looked like without their watering schedule that they have in place, and then the orange is with that watering schedule in place. So you can see a really big impact here. The bottom one is from another organization. This one is in Arkansas. It's talking about really communicating with their customers about why they want to avoid the peak, why it benefits their overall system, and can also help them keep water dependable and affordable. So it's interesting to see all of those pieces brought together in one place around peak demand. So as we were talking about this project, these were some of the questions that we want to explore with this research work, as understanding what are the different definitions that are relevant. Obviously, there's multiple ways to look at peak demand and peaking factors. So which ones are relevant for which decisions? And understanding what are the different drivers. So there's a lot of different things that are probably contributing to what peak demand looks like in a community. And so better understanding what is driving that, so that as you're designing strategies to try to manage that you're actually matching the strategy to the right, using the right tool for the right problem, so to speak. And so understanding obviously how climate change and extreme weather patterns are going to be influencing peak demand. So there's some communities that have lots and lots and probably too much water in some years, and then in other years, every once in a while, they have a really dry year, and they've basically designed their systems to meet that dry year demand. Is there a different way to go about doing that moving into the future? And we want to understand peak demand strategies, which ones are effective and why. Some of these strategies are designed to shift water usage, maybe not conserve water overall, but shift. And some of them are also designed to ultimately save water and make sure that we're using water more efficiently. So understanding the different nuances to these strategies and evaluating which ones are working and why. And then to the best of our ability, working with our participating agencies to understand what are the potential cost savings of managing peak demand through, customer side demand management strategies potentially, in addition to some other strategies, but helping to put some numbers behind this so that folks can use it to make the case for investing in these strategies, maybe in addition to or instead of some supply side or infrastructure side strategies. And also maybe making the case that some of these strategies that we're employing should potentially be, capitalized into your organization rather than just thought of as like O&M type cost, but really saying that this is something that we're investing in as a system. It looks a little different than a pipe, but it can be just as beneficial. So the expected deliverables on this particular project, we're hoping to develop, of course, an analytical report. So looking at multiple utilities and analyzing the trends and the drivers of their peak demands over, 15, 20 years. The PAC will decide on the timeline, but really understanding across different types of situations, what might be contributing to it, where are we seeing decreases, effective decreases in peaking, where are we seeing increases in peaking, and then an evaluation and description of different types of demand management strategies and understanding what's working and what's not working maybe as well as we could. And then a guidance document. So a little bit more high level than the analytical report, which would be much more technical and a lot more of a deep dive. The guidance document will help guide folks toward deploying the right peak management strategies for their situation. Some guidance around how to plan for future peak demands. Spoiler alert, it's not just using the same number for 10 years in a row, unless that's really what's happening. And then understanding what are the potential costs and benefits, or at least how to go about thinking and identifying those for your own organization. So the timeline and participant commitment for this one We're expecting to launch this one. This will probably be the third launched one out of 3 projects. Launch this one in the fall. Timeline, 1.5 years, maybe 2 years. And this one will be a mix of AWE staff and probably a consultant or potentially multiple consultants. So in terms of your commitment as a participant, we've got a project advisory committee, so maybe quarterly meetings there, some data collection and sharing of that. We're really hoping that and anticipating that these will be participants that to some extent have already undertaken some level of forecasting and planning. So being able to leverage the data that is already existing from some of those efforts with maybe some updates and some additional data collection required, but hopefully not having to start from scratch as an organization in gathering this data. And then we want to really spend some time with this particular project doing some in-depth interviews and focus groups with multiple folks at an agency. Again, this is a type of project that will hopefully engage multiple departments in an organization because we want to better understand, how are the treatment folks thinking and feeling about peak demands? How are your forecasters thinking about this? How are your planners? How are your, capital projects folks thinking about this? So we want to get a better understanding in addition to the voice that we often hear from, which is the conservation or efficiency folks. So we want to bring all of those perspectives together so that folks can make better decisions as an entire agency rather than in disparate silos. So expecting the time commitment would be somewhere 30 to 40 hours over the course of the 1.5 or 2 year project. And then this is what the funding and participation looks like. This is a bigger project. There's data analyst that goes along with this and data collection and cleaning and finding additional data sources. So bringing in weather and climate and population and lots of other pieces that will go into this. So this is scalable. So because this is driven by utility data, it is scalable depending on the number of participants. But this is just to give you a general ballpark of what we're targeting. And we do have the additional sponsor and supporter levels available. So if you're just excited about this research, you want to see it happen, you don't really have the time or capacity or ability to share data or something like that, you could just join as a research supporter and help make the project happen. Active sponsor would be a lot more, more moderately involved, participate in the project advisory committee. Wouldn't necessarily be providing data, but might be providing some qualitative. I wrote qualitative twice here, qualitative and high-level quantitative information. So it might be some basic information that's provided, but not nearly the depth that we'll be looking at for the full utility participants. And so that's the top one that you see, and they get more individualized technical analysis, a lot more in-depth interviews, so a lot more of your perspectives reflected in terms of how organizations are managing this and understanding which strategies that your organizations are working well. So I will pause here and see what questions have come in and or to launch the poll for this one.
I think it worked well last time. Thanks. Let's go ahead and launch the poll. I'll do that. And if you have questions, drop them in the chat. All right, while folks are filling that in, we have one comment that came up which said peak demand management is one of the benefits of AMI. So just a good observation there about connection between the various projects.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
There's a question came in. Are we seeking corporate sponsorships for the peak demand study? Engineering firms, tank builders, etc.
I think that's definitely an option. We haven't done some of that work yet. I think we want to make sure that this project and the work that will go into it really reflects the needs of our members. But we do, for each of these projects, really, we're looking outside of our typical places for funding support. So that's a great suggestion. We can spend some time looking at that. We also just want to make sure that the research is sound and potentially not influenced one way or another, so to speak. So we want to make sure it's still scientifically sound and meets the needs of our members. But we are very much open to having additional support that can also help spread the cost of the work out. That's always valuable in any of these research projects. So for AMI, we're reaching out to some of the vendors in this space and see if they're interested in helping support this work for the landscape project that you'll be hearing about next. We're seeing some interest in like irrigation-based companies supporting this work, things like that.
Great, and thanks for the question. We have your name and info down. We'll circle back. Final questions. I'm going to go ahead and close this poll. Any final questions on peak demands? All right, Lisa, that looks like it. And folks, if you have questions on AMI or peak demands that we didn't get to, drop them in and we can follow up with you. So we're going to move on, but if you have more questions, feel free to drop them in and we'll track those for you. Lisa.
Thank you, Andrew. So the last of our 3 projects I'm going to talk about is a focus on large-scale landscapes. Why would we focus on large-scale landscapes? There's of course nothing going on in this space. This I gathered in maybe 10 minutes of Googling, and there is so much activity happening around large-scale landscapes and landscapes in general, and understanding what are the different strategies that we can help reduce non-essential outdoor water use, whether it's for a temporary need or a long-term need. We're seeing things like in Utah, they're making sure that outdoor irrigation is metered when historically it has not been metered. We're seeing states, this bottom left one is from Colorado, states are contributing funding to help with turf replacement. Obviously there's lots of activity happening in Las Vegas. And then across the United States and Canada, anywhere you have, despite what type of landscape you have, optimizing irrigation on that landscape is valuable to anybody. So in any case, we want to make sure that people are not watering while it rains. We want to make sure that people are watering to the landscape need and not other objectives. So there's a lot that goes into this. And further, on large scale landscapes, there's sometimes lots of different stakeholders involved. And so it can be a more complex situation. And so to that point, we are focusing this research project really thinking broadly about optimizing water management on large scale landscapes. Because no matter your situation, the smart place to start is really with optimizing that management of irrigation. Sometimes that leads pretty quickly to talking about landscape transformation and getting into that space. We're seeing a lot of action in that world. But ultimately, optimizing that management of irrigation is going to be your ultimate goal, whether or not it is also partnered with the landscape transformation, or it's just getting folks to treat the landscape that they have in the right way. And utilities are trying so many different strategies in this space, and they have multiple objectives. So folks are beholden to lots of other priorities in their community, and it might be things like making sure that we have solid shade to manage urban heat and protect trees, which provide so many other benefits to a community, making sure that communities don't turn into what feels just like wrapped concrete desolate spaces, so maintaining livability and vibrancy. Obviously, as we're seeing extremes, stormwater management is increasingly just as important as reduced water use on landscapes. Habitat and pollinators, and then of course our good buzzword, overall resiliency. So making landscapes that are a lot more resilient to the reality of the environment that they're living in and the way that those landscapes are used within the community. Then the other thing that makes large scale landscapes challenging, as I mentioned, is multiple stakeholders. So you might have a property manager, a property owner. If it's an HOA, you've got all sorts of people with opinions, landscape contractor, maybe an irrigation management contractor separately, lots of different stakeholders involved, in addition to your utility who cares about your water use. And of course, these sustained landscape management strategies can really help during those water shortages too, whether it's by way of having better relationships with your customers or the contractors that influence the water use, or just having landscapes that are better adapted to manage through water shortages. So this was a project that has come up just by way of hearing from all of our members and seeing what's happened across the West, but also across really the entire US in terms of how folks are thinking about landscapes and the water that's used outdoors. So in thinking about who makes sense for this project, really it could be anybody that fits into these check boxes. So we're looking for a variety of perspectives to contribute to this research. You know, we do want folks that have supported lots of projects, have seen lots of success, maybe some good, maybe some not so good, but folks that are really excited to share how they've found success through large-scale landscapes. You know, we want to hear from people that have been focused a lot more on irrigation management, whether that's incentivizing smart controllers, whether that's, you know, partnering or creating incentives directly with the green industry. We want to hear from folks that have had a few projects, but maybe not a ton of uptake. People that are going to be exploring this in the future. Maybe you just have a residential scale program now, but you're going to be expanding into this bigger frontier in the future. And then folks that are just struggling, you know, the third to the last one's sort of written in jest, but HOAs, some of these properties are challenging to work with. And some folks are finding really great ways to navigate that. And so we want to make sure that we figure out how to share that success with the rest of the industry. And as we've been talking with our members about this particular project, we wanted to reflect these insights. So again, we don't want people to have to wait till the end result of a project to learn from it. So our project participants will be able to learn with others as we go. We've heard a need that this research is needed to be able to advocate for funding. So whether that's applying for a USBR grant or even just making the case for your own internal funding of why you should be doing these types of programs and the savings that you might be able to expect to get from them. Customers are asking for help, and it feels overwhelming to know how to start or where to start, how to partner and achieve multiple benefits. And we also wanted to recognize that we're hearing from members that want a way to participate, but maybe don't have tons of data or tons of projects, but they want to learn and benefit from an opportunity, a structured opportunity to engage with others who are grappling with the same challenge too. And then hopefully also a goal of this is really engaging that private side, irrigation and landscape industry companies and perspectives too. Because we're not the only ones that are thinking about these landscapes. So the objectives for this particular project, we've got 3 here. So the deep dive technical analysis, the water use analysis and evaluation report. So looking at both landscape transformation programs and what the savings have been from there, as well as projects that have been more focused on irrigation management. So that might be landscape water budgets, it might be irrigation audits, it might be an irrigation equipment or technology type rebate program. There's a variety of different models out there. And so we want to bring those examples to light and evaluate some of them. And then we really want to do a market readiness evaluation for these large scale landscape transformations and better understand where properties are ready to move forward and have moved forward and what the barriers and challenges are for other places that haven't taken that step forward yet. And then elevating the technical analysis into a guidance document in addition that will have examples of different programs designs, information about program costs, resources that go into making those programs run, whether that's managing it all in-house or working with additional contractors or consultants, those sorts of things. And then as a piece that hopefully you've seen throughout these other projects is really understanding what are the other nuts and bolts that makes these things effective. So maybe you need additional ordinances or service rules. Are there policies that you should consider? What types of technologies should you be thinking about? And then the learning and engagement activities. So this one we heard loud and clear for this particular project. Folks are actively working on this. People don't want to wait until the finished report to do anything with it. They want to learn alongside peers who are, honestly, people are really jazzed about this. And so I'm really excited for this particular peer learning cohort. So this project will have a peer learning aspect part of it. So not just the project advisory committee, which helps guide the research and project that we'll be doing, but also facilitated conversations for folks to learn and share from each other alongside the project. So what does the commitment look like? Oh, it says peak demands at the top, sorry about that. This is large scale landscapes. So this one we're hoping to launch in summer. So this will be the second of the 3rd projects to launch. Again, about a year and a half, potentially 2 years, 21 months, that sort of time frame. This one we anticipate will be a combination of AW staff as well as consultants. And looking at that participant commitment, this is involving the PAC, some data collection and sharing. So this one will involve sharing of water use data, billing data, those sorts of things. If you're participating at that level where you're going to get the individualized technical analysis, some interviews, focus groups, understanding lessons learned. Sometimes people have programs that have evolved quite a bit from where they started. So understanding what you have learned through that trial and error. And then the learning cohort meetings. So to some extent you can kind of scale your investment and involvement in terms of time, but just to give you a ballpark, 40 to 50 hours potentially, given that this also incorporates the learning cohort. This is where we're at. This is our biggest project of the three. And this one, we recently incorporated an additional one, so you won't see this in the brief, but we added another tier to this one to recognize the complexity of different types of organizations that might want to be involved in this. So you've got sort of the top tier, which is more comprehensive data, lots of projects, water use information to share, lots of program data, getting individualized technical analysis, obviously involved in the PAC and the learning cohort. And then down level is more limited data. So maybe you only have 15 projects that have occurred over the last 3 or 4 years. Those are still the great data points. We can still make a lot of good stuff out of that. So even though you might have limited data or limited projects, when we group all of that limited data together, in addition to utilities that have more fleshed out programs, we can learn a lot across many different types of settings and organizations and climates. And then we've got sort of sponsor supporter levels, again, for folks that maybe want to make this research happen, don't have data contribute, or don't have time to contribute, but still want to help make this project go. And this project is scalable. So this is just a target at this point in time, and the ultimate project scope and number of participants will scale with the budget. So I will pause here, and Andrew, turn it back to you for our questions and poll.
Great. I'm going to go ahead and launch this poll. And we do have one question already. If you have more, please drop them in. The first question is about academic research. And the question is really about, in what way does academic research inform the project from the beginning? Do we typically have partnerships or otherwise involve academic researchers in the process? And then how are results published by us or by collaborators?
All great questions. So from what I've seen in the past with AW Research Project, is it has varied. So sometimes we've just worked with AW staff and or consultants, and it's largely been sort of vetted by our members and vetted through the consultants that are doing that work, and we generate some sort of publication that's then available for AW members. In other cases, the research has engaged, like the cooling tower work, and engaged in a national lab. Other research has involved academic researchers. So I think we would take it project by project and understand what the role is for academic researchers to contribute to each project. Obviously, there's lots of great work happening at universities across the US and Canada, so we don't want to leave out those perspectives. Each project will have also a literature review, so we want to make sure that we're capturing all of the known information that's already out there. And then I think depending on where things are at and where the PAC is at, there's always opportunity. And I think something that we can explore as an organization is finding additional avenues to share out the results from our projects through things like academic level publications and those more peer-reviewed journals and things like that. I rambled for a little bit there, Andrew. I don't know if I answered all of the questions that were as part of that.
I think you got them all. And if anyone has further questions on that point, please follow up with us or drop your name, say you want more in the chat, and we'll take down your name and follow up with you. So I'm about to close the poll in about 10 seconds here, and also looking for any final questions. All right, go ahead and close this. Thanks for all the responses. And I don't see any other questions.
Okay. And I will mention on this one, we were awarded a ICP grant, so was it Innovation Conservation Program, Innovative Conservation Program through MET in Southern California. And so we will be able to help support some of the participating utilities in California. So just know that that is an option for folks that are in the California world. So next steps, if you submitted yes to any of the polls, we'll reach out to you. No additional action necessary. You can just go on about your days. If you didn't submit a response and are maybe thinking about it more or want to talk to others in your organization or your team or your boss or whoever first, feel free to reach out to us. I threw Andrew's email in here so you can manage that. So reach out to Andrew and keep the conversation going with us. We're hoping to schedule our conversations with potential participants by mid-April to get kind of a near complete set of participants. And so just because we're looking to kind of secure participation by, maybe mid-April or May, in terms of actual the financial piece of funding and participation, we're really flexible on that. So at this point, we're just making sure that we have some commitments in place, and then we're super flexible, recognizing that everybody's budgets are different, and maybe they have excess budget right now, or they need to wait until after the start of the fiscal year, whatever it is. So we're super flexible right there. So just because we're looking to have conversations over the next month does not mean you need to secure funding over the next month. And then reiterating the target project start dates, we're spacing these out. So the AMI primer starting here in the spring, large scale landscapes into the summer, so July or August, and then peak demands into the fall, October, November timeframe. Any other questions that have come in, Andrew, before I go to some other announcements?
Checking them, nope, nothing else.
Okay, great. So we've got a few minutes, and then I will just share some other AW announcements while I've got a semi-captive audience. If you haven't heard, the Alliance is putting on its first ever water efficiency and conservation symposium. It'll be in first week of August in Chicago. So pretty excited. Most of my trips to Chicago have been when it's cold and blustery, so I'm very excited to be there in August. And this will be a smaller event than other conferences, so space is limited, but we're really excited that that will allow a very dynamic event that will be a lot more interactive, bringing together folks and really starting from the perspective that everybody has something to contribute, not just the person at the front of the podium. So really wanting to make for lots of opportunities for folks to connect with their AWE network. So join us. I hope you'll consider it. And the abstracts period is open right now. So we're looking for folks to contribute their ideas for the program. That's open until Friday, March 31st. If you have an idea and just want to noodle on it with Andrew or myself, feel free to reach out and we can talk it through and help. And you're welcome to submit multiple ideas as well. And then if you're looking for additional opportunities to get involved with your AWE network, we have 3 committees, as well as we coordinate the conservation AMI group, the CAMI group. So if you're interested and not currently plugged into any of these, it's a great way to meet others as well as contribute to what AWE is working on in terms of programs, research, and services. So if you want to just share through the Q&A function, if you want to get plugged into those, and we can reach out and make it easy for you. And I think the last thing that I'll shout out about is upcoming webinars. So the next one is Wednesday, March 29th, Smart Practices to Save Water with AMI-enabled leak notifications. This will be presenting that study that I mentioned recently, and hopefully the report will be available by the same date, if not shortly after. And then our partnership series with EPA WaterSense the next day on Thursday, March 30th. This one is focused on planting trees for the future, so thinking about the future of trees in our communities. And you can always find upcoming webinars and register by going to our events page in our calendar. And with that, I will turn it back to Andrew for any final questions or closing.
Thanks, everyone. Don't see any final questions. Appreciate all of your time. And we'll be gathering the poll results and reaching out to all of you soon. Thanks so much.